And what we realized very fast is what AI can do today, it suddenly dawned on us that it's taking away the human value of what humans can do in the marketplace.
You hit the nail on the head there, because it comes down to a moral standpoint versus greed, corporate greed.
Right. If you have a collective intelligence together, where what you put in, you're rewarded back out. Now we're talking about an ethical system, right?
Welcome back to Raw AI Solutions, the podcast where we explore how leaders are navigating the fast-moving world of AI and digital transformation. I'm your host, Denise Powell, and today we are joined by Chris Busch, founder and CEO of MSTRO. Chris, I hope that's how you pronounce it.
We like to just forget the vowels are there and just call it Maestro.
Maestro, love that. Well, it's a strategic consultancy helping organizations simplify complexity and make better, faster decisions through alignment and clarity. So, Chris, delighted to have you with us. Welcome.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Denise.
Chris, would you like to kick us off a little bit? Tell us, the audience, a little bit about yourself and your company.
Maestro was started from a standpoint of unifying data. And what does that really mean, and why does that matter? And when we started on this journey, we went down a path of understanding that we had to unify data, and then what do you do with it next? And that's really where we've been the last, 3 years, building that out. And what we realized very fast is what AI can do today, it suddenly dawned on us that it's taking away the human value of what humans can do in the marketplace. And we've built Maestro as an AI system that is really targeted for SMBs. We started with the enterprises, but we realized that the real meat of what makes everything move and from an innovation standpoint is SMBs. And so we retargeted to the SMB markets segment. But what we realized was you can't give away what AI is taking from a workflow standpoint, because if you do, then what's left for the human at the end of the day? And that's really why you're seeing a lot of what's going on in the market. So we built the solution to protect the interactions, the data interactions of how individuals interact with AI, to make sure it maintains the human's ability, that what belongs to them, like their intuition, their intent on how they use it and what they do, which is what you could protect in the physical world, but you can't in the digital world anymore. We focused a system that was built around that. And by doing so, that allowed us to really understand how elevating human intelligence is better than just automating human intelligence. And when you look at AI, we like to talk to AIs more around augmented intelligence plus use greater than AI, because the artificial part of it is what is causing the market to have a lot of layoffs, a lot of problems, a lot of adoption issues. If you think about where everyone's trying to go with it, they're trying to solve a problem that's not a business problem. It's an academic problem. But I'll stop there.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's a topic definitely worthwhile discussing. But today we're going to be cutting through the noise around how AI confusion is reshaping decision-making in mid-sized firms. So, Chris, what are you seeing any latest trends lately? Are your customers asking different questions now as opposed to a year ago?
I would say, I think, depending on the market, because about a year ago, we were really talking to enterprises, and then we switched to the SMB market segment. But the problem's the same. But with the SMB market segment, what you're really getting down to is the unification of data and being able to just connect your applications, your databases, the simplistic things that enterprises can deal with because of the large budgets and the manpower they have, is the difference that we're seeing that Maestro alone solves. But what I think is really happening is we're focusing so much on the tech, and what they're leading with is we're forgetting about the actual customer experience. And the problem with that is then the tech leads, and it's cool tech, don't get me wrong, and there's a lot of different ways to apply it, but the way that it's being applied is a way that it's taking away that human value. And I think that's why the return on investment, and it's easy to tout, oh, I've automated this much hours of an individual, I automated this and done this. But I'm going to compare it back to my days in the federal space, where basically if you look at how the federal government, the U.S. federal government was operating, the Army loved lowest price technically acceptable. They call it LPTA. What that really was basically an automated solution for today, but didn't evolve with time, right? And when you look at the market, we're all in a race and we're all starting to sound the same, and we're all going down that exact same path. And we're all starting to become a commoditized kind of approach to professional services, which kills the value of what makes each of us unique. And I think that is what the fear is, what we're starting to see from, for example, the approach that we took was we went to the MSPs, the managed service providers, who is the prime example of what that looks like, what everyone's heading towards. Because since like 1990, they've been on a path where they've gone to almost the rock bottom, to where their whole business models are being attacked from a recurring revenue standpoint, which is exactly the problem that everyone else is going to start having, which I don't get because I come from the integrators. What we sold was people. If you're selling automation, where's those high bill rates?
So what are you as a company doing to stay ahead of that curve that's coming up?
So we went down the path of agents. We looked at that. We looked at this and went all over the place with the technology, right? But when it came down to the passion or the drive of what we believe is like the right ethos of how to use the technology, we really focused mainly around, okay, how do we protect the interactions versus the data, right? So we built a product that allows for the business to maintain the data, the quality, the observability, the traceability. They even provision it to themselves. But what that does is allows for a federated approach, which is really what Europe is more ingrained with. Considering we're in the US, we built for Europe. And the reason we did that is because we basically saw that the model that they're talking about there is what matters from a standpoint of what belongs to a business, right? But that logic plays into the business model that everyone else is playing in, that like the titans of the world, I'll call them, which is Google and AWS and Microsoft. They're making you play by that business model. And so when you look at the end of the day, that's a 30-year-old model. And what that's really doing is it's forcing us to think that you have to embed the data into the models, and you really don't. So we immediately realized when we looked at the market that if we step out of the bounds and look at it as like, maybe all these technical problems are really symptoms, and the real issue here is the business model of how it's sold. And the moment you can step out of that, then you can actually build your own framework to understand how to work with AI, where our model is human transaction. It's about keeping the human in the loop, to where every time that a professional service is sold, it's the same logic in the physical world, but now in the digital. Because if you think about it, what you're really doing is you're bringing your expertise to a company of a certain like profession, right? But that profession is now tailored through how you look at their data versus how they look at their data. They can ask the same question, but they'll never get to that same result. But the way that you move through that and the way that you interact with it is what makes you special. And that is what we realized had to be protected. It's almost like my wife like kind of like makes fun of me for this, but when I like to step away and think about things, I like watching like probably like stupid sci-fi movies. I'll watch any of them, right? But it allows my mind to process. And if you think of how AI is working, it has to process, right? But the problem is it's processing and reasoning for you, but humans are the best reasoners out there, right? That's our special sauce. And so that's our special sauce. And then suddenly, as I'm sitting there watching those movies, I get those aha moments, which is that spark of clarity. And that right there allows me to be different than what AI could ever be. And that we realized can't just go in a workflow. It can't go into an agent. It can't be that, because now the business, it's not about enabling the business. It's about enabling that individual. So we built a system that truly solves the business problems through discovering through data, but we solve that through giving the individual the ability to own that thought line, or what we call a motif.
So many questions, but I'm going to start off with this one. Do you think then things like a data lake and data warehouse, do you think that's a thing of the past, knowing how we can use AI with data?
Absolutely in the past, because it's actually another product of a business model of the large integrators. I mean, my background, I came from GDIT, Unisys, NTT. I worked for the very large integrators running $100 million plus like captures for the federal government segment across all segments. And every opportunity we went after, we built basically a unified engine, or we applied a unified engine to make data as like one platform. Well, the problem is they used exactly what you're talking about. And by doing that, what you're doing is you're duplicating the data and you're compounding the issue of what's the version of truth. But at the end of the day, the version of truth that for Usenis, for me, for anyone is going to be different because of how we see the data. Why everyone has problems working with general models. And when you think in that context, data lakes and data warehouses are just an extension of how technical folks want to do it. That's not direct business intent or business intelligence. And so it's like kind of back to like the old BI tools, Tableau, Power BI, all of them. Everyone thinks that you can bed model like the data into the models and have like a RAG system and pull and do whatever you want to say you're going to do. But at the end of the day, it's not real time. It never will be. The only time it could become real time is why not use the data from the source of where it's correct at the endpoint within the application or database or whatever, and stream it. So when it is actually being asked for, that's how we've done it. And by doing it that way, what we did is we built a back end that manages basically is the semantic of the topics of the dialect of a company to give a version of the truth to the technical folks, but the application is where the business folks interact and never have to deal with what AI is, because the end of the day, none of us really want to learn how to build it. We just want it to work.
Wouldn't it really define, number one, how your architecture is actually defined, but not only your architecture, because you're going to source systems, but inside your application, if it hasn't been built correctly, you can have several places where you can actually change data as opposed to have, this is your source system over here. This is the source of truth. And you cannot change this data anywhere else in any other application. So therefore you can go and run real-time information. But if your applications aren't built that way, so through legacy or acquisitions and that, how would you actually go about defining where is your source of truth when it comes to data?
The individual. It comes down to the individual. And that's why everyone's missing in my opinion, when I look at everyone's solutions or I look at what people are doing, it's cool tech. Don't get me wrong. They're doing awesome things. Everyone out there has great ideas and they're going the right direction, but they're not thinking the bigger picture of what's best for humanity. And when you think of it in this way, everyone, the big AI companies have convinced everyone that you have to use a lot of GPU and you have to basically build like train models over and over. But what does that really mean? That means money in their pockets, because what we're really talking about is how they control the inferencing of how the model gets to you, how they control the aspects of the data, the cloud, everything else. It just duplicates and duplicates. So it's just revenue, right? Well, if you think of the energy problems in the world, you think of everything else of how data centers suddenly became like the epicenter of like, you have to have this, you have to put billions in to even invest into AI. That's just the hype of being able to control it from the infrastructure all the way to the end user's experience. So then what's left for everyone else? And that is where it really comes down to why I think everyone wants to solve a problem, but until you get to the rock bottom of it and you really think about how that problem is going to impact the greater good, and call me a bleeding heart or whatever, but I have children. I don't want them growing up in a world where they have no value. And so when I think in that way, a universal work, like a universal like pay or whatever we move to, that doesn't solve anything, because if you think about it, you just took away someone's value. That's your purpose. That's what makes all of us get up in the morning and move and do things. And so if you take that away, who's going to buy these solutions? That's what I really don't get. Because it's now suddenly it's like professional services runs the world. Like, let's be honest. Everyone, 90% of it is all about using your minds to solve problems. And suddenly if you're handing that over for AI to do that and automate, that's not really how the best for humanity works. And especially for the best technology, computer, let's be honest, is the best technology that was ever, that came out. But it's a tool. And it's always been a tool. And some reason we got lost in the aspect of thinking that AI is going to replace us and do what we need it to do, instead of thinking of it as a tool to enable us to process faster, to reason better. So we made the application reason better using the human. So the source of truth of data is to what the human sees as their intuition, their gut feeling, to be able to actually make logic outside of what a model is trained on, just from a data aspect.
So the whole premise about, like what Elon Musk was saying, that AI has now reached the point where it's actually coding and we don't even know what it's doing. It's like it's coding itself to get better and better. That's coming. How do you think that's going to have an impact on the human element?
If it's coding within a human framework that we provided from a foundational model. So it has its limits, right? If it can't step outside those limits, then it's still within a framework. So there's a limit to what it can do. How does it get out of that? Well, if you can give it what everyone's after now, which is the gold, it's not data. Don't get confused. Data, they'll trick you into like the VC world of thinking that's a moat, right? It's not. Or the applications or SaaS solutions out there, that's their moat, and they're going to try to protect it. But the reality is that's old. What it comes down to is what you do with it. Why they give you free access to ChatGPT, why they give you free access to these large language models, because what they're really doing is they're understanding how you interact with data to then take that logic to the next level. Why OpenAI, for example, came out with professional services to the actual enterprises, taking something out of Paradigm's book. The reason they did that is because they realized that if we can get down to the ground level and understand exactly what these humans are doing with it, or these individuals are doing with it, now we can give the automation that these businesses want and eliminate that person. But that person's training their replacement. Don't get it twisted. So basically, when I look at it in that way, it scares the crap out of me, because and you're already seeing the effects of it. And so it suddenly looks like a world that turns very gray fast, that gets right back to what I was saying before in the beginning about LPTA, because no innovation will ever be pushed in. So back to what you're saying about Musk's thing is, where's the innovation? Where's the intuitive block? Where's the creativity that makes humans unique? You have to save it as a motif, like we're doing, to where the individual understands how it interacts, to save that intention process, which is just a workflow, which is every single application out there. Let's be honest, the data schema comes down to three things that humans need to do: access data, drive insight, apply existing knowledge. Well, if you can serve that up in a user-centric manner, you have a horizontal solution across the board that now is vertically focused based on that human's workflows.
I mean, actually, one of the topics that keep coming up over and over again is there's a lot of fear out there about adopting AI, because, as you said, you're training up a replacement for your own role. And so how do you get people to adopt AI and embrace it, but use it in such a way that they're not actually going to replace themselves?
It comes down to a product or an offering. And actually, California just passed a law, I think it was just recently, which came down to banning AI being made or stealing someone's persona, right? And if you think of every application or approach out there, they're putting a persona into the platform, but the persona is in there because it enables the business. Well, why not have a product that enables the individual and lets the individual own that persona, who's then put in as a role into the actual system to allow them to interact with the system? It's almost like everyone thinks, and we've been taught down to the MBA logic, that the way business is done is you got to figure out how to make a business model and sell it to them and make profit, right? The problem is with AI, it suddenly gave us the ability to mimic a person's ability to do what they do in the physical world in a system approach to digital, which suddenly gave them the ability to eliminate that person. So everyone's built solutions within that model that actually takes away, I guess, in my view of the world, and who am I, but it takes away the ability for us as individuals to have a monetary value. That is what suddenly you have to protect when you build these systems versus a system that is for the few to profit the minority. The majority. I'm sorry?
You hit the nail on the head there, because it comes down to a moral standpoint versus greed, corporate greed. Like, it depends which seat you're sitting in. Yeah.
Yeah, but back to what you asked me about the Musk question about AI's programming for itself and everything. I like that. That's amazing technology, but why can't the collective whole of how it's doing that reward the collective whole of who contributed to it? That's what's missing here. It's like we're screaming down a path where these businesses are only thinking about how they're going to defend themselves from the market and have these solutions and corner something. And what we're losing is the ability to really understand how's that better for everyone involved. And really, are you just a ticking time bomb for humanity to implode on itself because now there's no value or purpose, and what's left for us to do other than fight with each other? I don't know. But if you have a collective intelligence together where what you put in, you're rewarded back out. Now we're talking about an ethical system, right? And we're talking about an ethical system that rewards the professional services of how we've been doing it for so long. It's not broken. It just needs to move to the digital world and be done in a way that rewards the human in the loop. And it lets them maintain that uniqueness that gives them the monetary value.
So with this trend coming up, because we all know it is, and you're staying ahead of the curve, what AI are you actually using to get ahead of this and to make sure that this actually doesn't happen? What tools have you found? What AI tools have you found that helps you?
A lot of the solutions today, even like you go to like Lovable or any other ones that are building applications or per like prompts. And I'm going to answer this a little indirectly. And the reason why is because it comes down to just the weird way my mind thinks. And when I look at what everyone's doing, it's still a technically led solution. So kind of how that question came out is like, everyone wants to know what tech stack you use, or the technical folks want to know how you're doing it. But let me ask you this, when the iPhone came out and it was handed to you and Steve Jobs dropped it and everyone's like, oh my God, it's amazing. They just cared it worked. And so what we realized was it's that experience of being able to trust the system that allows for the human to be part of the loop of the intelligence it's gaining, not being told. And that comes down to being able to explore the data as you build out the workflows to make it tactically work for that business. So our system at the end of the day has been built all with open source. And what we've done is we've tailored it to where like an application's built, you never hard code the data in, you build it as a functionality to actually give a result, right? So we've built it to where it doesn't even use heavy GPU, because what we're really doing is serving AI to allow the human and elevate their intelligence to process through it. That allows for what I'm describing as the intentions to now be separated from the data, to where the individual can have their own instance and their own, say, like tenant environment or their own protected, what we call an M-brain, and basically allow them to maintain their intentions as motifs. But all are the intentions of the individual of how they interact with the data, not the data. Data never leaves. But that is how you leave, for example, in the physical world, why you apply with your resume and why you are able to say thank you very much and move on. That company in the past could never mimic what you did. They can have all your results and your thoughts of how you did it, but they can't do it because they're not you. They don't have your intentions, your intuition makes you special. But now they can. And so what we realize is that if you create an ecosystem that is almost where it's their own instance, and all MSTRO is the orchestrator in between from a standpoint of connecting. Now we just gave a framework for everyone to thrive in and dream with us.
That's brilliant. So as clients expect AI results for less, how should mid-sized firms rethink the value proposition to avoid commoditization?
I'm going to go back to the MSP market, right? Because they service a lot of the mid-sizes of the world, as well as the smalls. They're kind of the trusted advisors to those firms, almost like lawyers and like CFOs are, right? And so when you look at it in that way, they're already the best mechanism to scale through. And what I mean by that is they're already the ones who have the agreements to do the professional service of the IT, right? And what they're providing is the professional services to maintain the IT. So if a system provides a framework for them to continue to maintain and set up for a company, then the app just becomes how the business users interact for direct business intent or intelligence. So instead of looking at AI from a vertical standpoint of like, oh, I want to automate marketing, or I want to automate sales, or I want to do this, those companies are doing great and they're awesome. But what they're lacking is a framework for the whole organization to thrive with. And so what MSTRO and what we've done is we've built the ability for the MSPs to still thrive in this kind of world, to where they're selling their professional services to maintain the back end, but we've used flat economics to roll the system out. And by doing that way, that takes the competition off of the licensing and it puts it on the professional services that's actually traded through the marketplace for human transaction, to allow for them to not only have recurring revenue, but now they actually can push their differentiator through the professional services through the marketplace. And so what you suddenly have is an ecosystem that operates like it does in the physical world, now in the digital, but you're enabling the collective intelligence as a whole of humanity to now own a piece of it, versus us owning a model that is supposed to be the one answer for all. And that approach, back to one of your original questions about how does Musk think that like basically AI is going to program itself? Well, how do we get out of a framework that humans built? What if we train models on the intent of how humans used it, but can now reward every human that's part of the collective intelligence of humanity with what they put in? Totally different kind of paradigm than what we're looking at right now and where we're headed.
That's such an ethical way of looking at things, and I think people should be more aware of this. I think it's brilliant what you're doing. So if you zoom out and look at MSTRO, where do you want to be in the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, we're launching in Europe. We'll be launching this year in Europe as well. We just signed our deal with our distribution partner in the US, and we're also looking at South America. So the way that we kind of position ourselves is we position ourselves for mass scale quickly. And why? Well, what it comes down to is it comes down to really being able to enable the individual and giving the individual the ability to now have value to contribute back. But if you look at the workforce of how individuals have been laid off, we really are on a push to be fast, because we see that this is an opportunity for people to figure out and choose how to return. And what I mean by that is the days of where we're employees, and the days like my parents, for example, those good old days are gone. And the reason being is because they used to work with the company for 30 years and the company was loyal to them and they were like, oh, it's family, blah, blah. Now it's not how the world works. Everyone has been so programmed to think about profits that shoot, I have friends that are being laid off that were there for 20 years and pretty much gave them the biggest $1 billion wins that they've had with those companies, but they're being let go because at the end of the day, it's all about satisfying that shareholder, right? And showing the true profit. And so the reason that we went from a route of not going one by one and the normal approach to how VCs or how MBA is going to tell you that this is 101 of how you start a business is because that model is slow from a standpoint of having to do multiple rounds after. And the reason being is because you build an architecture, you go through the architecture and you get to a certain point, you prove the point, and now you need a Series A because you got to rebuild the architecture. And then you do that again and again for the other ones. And the problem is you're building it because you're playing their game. You're not building it to where you're trying to enable actually something that matters from a standpoint of what matters to you and why you started that company. And so we saw that. And that's why we went on a route where we want to take MSTRO from a standpoint of entering through the MSPs, or what we call value resellers, enabling their business models and flattening the economics on the licensing, which allows for them to now compete on the professional services. But every license sold to an organization is 25 individuals. Well, for those individuals to access Maestro's hives, they have that sold to businesses, they have to create an account within Maestro's hub, which we call an in-brain. And that in-brain account is their own individual instance they own. Different than everyone else, where they're trying to capture you from a standpoint of tech debt and own what you do. We're giving them the ability to own it, almost like how Apple lets you own basically your iPhone data and everything else is yours, right? And so if you take that approach and every motif they build, you've now built the workforce for tomorrow, which scaling through giving the businesses business intelligence to give them the ability to solve immediate problems, but then really being able to solve their needs for why do I need a CFO, or why do I need a strategy, or why do I need business improvement? Because that whole market just gets turned on.
How are you overcoming the data issues, especially if launching in Europe? Because the US are tightening up on data, Europe are tightening up on data. How are you overcoming that issue?
The data is not saved in our models. So basically the way Maestro works is the data just flows through it, and the system's built to just serve it. So all the system is doing is, from the human interaction from the app, it's now able to go back to the endpoints within all the API connections or databases, whatever is connected on the back end that's already been provisioned by the company, from their observability, traceability, all of it. It allows for the data to just be streamed, not saved. It's never saved in our stuff. So we don't actually provide like everyone else's models, where they pull your data out and they train it into their bigger model and then they connect it back in, which is the biggest problem you're really getting at with Europe, where in essence you have no idea where your data is going. But the funny part of that is in the US, we have the same laws, which are regulatory and compliance on industries. You're not allowed to do that either, but we're overlooking that. So it's kind of a situation where I think the CISO of organizations are going nuts. But the reality is everyone's so determined to implement AI that they're not thinking about the impact or what they're giving away to do it. And so we, from a standpoint of how Maestro was built, was always ran at it where the data was never the business problem. And once you step out of thinking that way, you can mold frameworks and build new ways to serve it, to then just allow a normal person to be able to calibrate it. And so what we're really doing is we're offering in a way for everyone to be able to have a framework that serves it from a standpoint of laying over the architecture of what you have today and in place, and not allowing the data to leave. So it's a different paradigm.
It certainly is. Absolutely. And what do you think your biggest challenges are, or are going to be over the next year while you're trying to branch out into Europe?
Maestro is a very complex product from how we built it, because it's solving issues that are on multiple different levels, and it's easy to get lost into the weeds of the tech or the business solution. There's just so much there to unpack. And I think what it comes down to is, what does humanity really want to be when we move forward in this revolution that's going on, right? And I think it comes down to, can an individual really actually be okay with giving away their intelligence and not having value, versus, do I want to make an income today and work for a company who's going to eliminate me tomorrow? And I think there's a balance. And I think the balance comes down to businesses understanding that at the end of the day, employment laws that we had in place, like employees, where you talk about their IP and everything, is very different than it was when we all signed those agreements. And so what I'm really saying is, the workforce that's choosing to come back has the leg up over the workforce that's still employed. And that becomes the challenge of, how do we enroll that workforce into to having that decision of how they return, to have control over their future, where they're not just eliminated the next day that they return.
This sounds like it's going to be really hard to land with clients, because I think if you go to execs in a company, they're going to go, oh, show me the ROI. Are you able to prove ROI for the execs as well as preserve human integrity?
Absolutely. I think this just kind of goes back to the root of like what we were kind of getting at with the 101 of how you do business, right? Or the MBA approach of like, you have to show value and you have to do X, Y, Z. And that's why everyone went to the most easy easy one to do, which is like, well, we can automate all these tasks and look how much hours we saved. And what do you think management was like? Well, then why do we need these employees all this time if they're just sitting around doing nothing now? So it's kind of like a chicken and egg and approach of like a use case to like what the ROI is, and you're showing, because in a way, what I'm really getting at is are we focused on the right metrics to actually determine what ROI is? And what I mean by that is the way that we've done business and the way that we've always operated, we've operated with the tools that we had available to us today, or we saw within the dimensions that we can see by the tools that we had available, right? But if you suddenly can see in different dimensions, and you break down the walls of what tables look like and analytics looks like, and you actually can see in between the lines, I think your ROI changes very dramatically. And I think what you're really measuring for business changes to what matters from the standpoint of what that endpoint does to impact and move the business versus what the politics did from a standpoint of what my organization or this group wants to do and fights back and tries to show analytics against it. You suddenly get into a world where AI is giving us the ability to weed out the politics, the disconnects, the what makes working for an enterprise the worst, in my opinion. And it allows for the true intelligence of what the data says to the intuition of the individual to now allow for that communication errors and problems of what makes us human to get out of the way. And you can truly see it. And so when you think of ROI in that way, MSTRO provides the O&M aspect of automation, which everyone is touting and talking about. But the problem is that just keeps you alive. What makes you grow is the innovation. And that's what MSTRO is giving. It's providing the individual the ability to serve up that sparks of that innovation in real time as they do their workflows, which makes them special and makes one employee better than another employee versus a consultant. And so how do you measure that? And I think that's kind of where everything is starting to finally realize the power of what AI can do. But that's the true ROI of MSTRO. It's providing the ability to innovate, grow, succeed. And that's how you stay alive, not automate. Because if you just automate, you're just counting down the days till you're done.
I love that. That's really good. So if you could solve anything like with a click of a finger, what would it be?
I think the biggest thing that I would love to solve, if I could, is allow for a dream that we have, that we want, that we desire, is a dream that doesn't kill other people's dreams. And what I mean by that is, if you look at a lot of the big named individuals that have done big things and crazy things, and I'm not going to call people out, but basically, I understand this. You become obsessed. You become so ingrained about the dream of what it is that you almost forget about how it impacts everything else. When that happens, you force other people to make them sacrifice their dreams to now enable what your dream was. And what I would love to see and fix is have a system that allows for the individuals to dream within it and have a place within it, to where it's forcing them to change how they want to live or do or be. It's actually enabling their creativity to then have the ability to contribute, but also get back what they contribute. And so I truly believe that is better for humanity, and it pushes in the right way. And actually, I think it was Steve Jobs who said this, who was talking about the computer, right? And how the computer is the greatest invention. And if you look at it, it's on a bell curve going out. And as it's going out, we don't know where it's going to end up, right? And that's kind of where we are right now. And really what he was getting at was if we keep pushing it out, better for humanity and better for the experience and better for us, then it has an infinite ability to be how we get to the next level of our intelligence, right? But right now, what's happening is we're pushing it in, and we're pushing it in because of the greed of dreams of how individuals want to own it all. And that is what I really would love to change is to have humanity or just individuals realize that if we push it back the other way and we won't work on a system that takes this away from us, we'll only work on a system that enables this, that that's a dream I want to live
And basically treat AI responsibly, really. Wow, it's humanity, for sure. Before we wrap up, if there's one piece of advice you would have given to yourself before you embarked on this journey, what would it be?
Don't do it. I know everyone says that, but it's because, look, the only reason we got to where we are is I was naive to what it was going to take. I think that's a superpower of an entrepreneur. And honestly, I think that's what makes someone who doesn't really understand a topic or industry so dangerous, because they're willing to go down this path that others are like, oh no, it's going to be too hard. I don't want to do it. And I truly think like that if we're that ambitious to do it, there shouldn't be anything in our way to stop us, right? But there's a lot of pain and suffering that you have to go through to make that a dream come true. And I think that is what everyone kind of doesn't truly understand when they get into the journey until they go through it. And they look back and they're like, why did I do this? Because they had that passion. But if you get into this business and you're doing this just to raise money, that's not a milestone. That's a financial, basically all that is a mechanism to bring financial solutions. It's not you shouldn't celebrate. It doesn't matter, because what it matters is actually selling and making money as a business. And really what it comes down to is having a product that actually, or service that actually provides value to someone and returns it. And you have a passion to solve that issue. So no, even my partner will tell you this too. Like that kind of journey that we've been down, it's a roller coaster ride. And so be prepared for that, for sure.
You have to believe in yourself. Absolutely. And believe in your product that you're selling, for sure.
But you also have to be passionate about what you want to actually do. And if your passion is just to go make money, it's not this way. There's no quick get rich scheme within the aspect of AI like everyone thinks there is. Even people who are building applications today and think that like, oh, I can code this way. That's not the back end to scale a product is not there with that. It's like you have to build the back end to support 100-mile-an-hour winds versus 10. And what you're getting something that can only support it. It can't scale. And so now what you really have is you have a product that is for what? And so you built all this stuff and you proved the thing. So now you got to raise money and now you got to build the back end. Now you have to do this. So it's almost like Lovable and all the other ones are kind of almost like I hate to say it like this, but if you think of like almost payday loans, or like the aspect of like you take a loan and you don't really think about what the outcome's going to be because you need the money so bad. It's like that, because what you're not realizing is the tech debt that you're creating isn't owned by you. And so that tech debt that's on the back end, if you don't pay your subscription, you don't keep control of it, well, guess what? It's theirs. They go out of business. It's theirs. We already experienced that with one of the big ones that went down. So that, just remember what everyone's in this for is a business model. They look to differentiate, or they look to defend it. You have to understand what a business is doing to defend their business model, to understand if you're the product or what is the product. And that's kind of where I think that people get lost in the weeds of thinking that that's how you keep customers, and it's not.
Well, that's some great advice there, Chris. Thank you so much. So if listeners would like to know more about MSTRO or meet directly with Chris, please look at the description below. Contact details we found there. Chris, it's been a wonderful pleasure having you on board. Thank you so much for joining us on our podcast. I'm wishing you all the best of MSTRO and Europe launch.
I look forward to it and look forward to talking to you again.